Welcome to the last episode of the Analytics Experience Podcast Season 2. Today we're here with Jonathan Javier, CEO and founder of Wonsulting, Force 30 Under 30. And here we have also Bruno Carrera and Alfredo Serrano.
We're more than glad to have you here tonight, Jonathan. Thank you for taking your time to sit down with Alfredo and I.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. And again, we appreciate your time. We're super excited to close the season with you. And before we start on anything, we wanted to ask you, could you tell us a bit about your journey? You have an amazing story. You have millions of followers through social media. You're a huge helper on LinkedIn. And personally as well, I am connected to you. You guys, I use your services to land my first full-time job. The Wonsulting services actually helped me out a year ago, something like that, to land my first full-time job. So thank you again for everything that you've done for the community. We really appreciate you. And it's great to see people like you that want to help others to land their dream jobs.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, a little bit of background about myself. So I'm Jonathan, CEO, founder of Wonsulting. And for my career, I still remember just being in university thinking that I would just focus in my career later on, meaning I would just go through the motions from my first to my third year. And then during my senior year, it was like, okay, I'm going to figure it out now. And I feel like that happens to a lot of students or people who are about to graduate. They say, oh, I'll go figure out my career when I need to. I can just go do whatever I want in the beginning stages. However, I realized that by doing that, it was definitely more of a struggle landing a job later on because I went to a non-target school and had a very non-traditional background, first generation. My mom's a nurse, my dad didn't work and didn't have really connections in my dream industry, which was in that case was like the tech industry. So was applying to a lot of different roles, wasn't getting responses, and it felt like I was just going to start out in retail, which there's nothing wrong with retail, but I always just thought to myself I had to work at a retail company or a big four first before breaking into tech, for example. However, just by utilizing unconventional strategies, non-traditional strategies, which I teach today, was able to land my jobs at Snapchat, Google, and Cisco, all by just utilizing social media and LinkedIn, which I'm going to talk about today of how data professionals can do the same, because I've helped now millions of people land respective jobs. One of them being you, Alfredo, and hopefully we can help millions more, especially with this podcast today. So I'm very excited to be chatting and looking forward to all the questions.
Okay, first of all, you mentioned Google and Snapchat. How was your experience? I saw that you worked there like at least 1 year in each company. How was your experience? What was your job and your job responsibilities in each one of them?
Yeah, so a little background about my time at Snap and Google. So at Snapchat, I was there for about only 8 months, which is kind of crazy to think about, right? 8 months. And you're probably thinking, why was this guy only there for 8 months? Well, I'll explain a little bit. So at Snapchat, what I did was I worked a lot with our product operations team to basically streamline processes for our customer experience. So it was a lot of utilizing skills like Zendesk, Jira, all these different things to improve processes for our product operation side. And it was a great experience. Like it was a very startup vibe. This is 2017. But unfortunately, I was only there for 8 months because our positions actually got outsourced 8 months in, which is crazy because imagine your first role out of college and you're already outsourced in 8 months, your whole team, and you couldn't do anything about it, right? But then I was able to use LinkedIn to land another role at Google. So I worked at Google for about a year and a half. I worked half the time I was in a sales operations role, which was basically a sales strategy role, working with a lot of our account managers on figuring out how to get people, number one, to buy for local services, which was for Google Ads, and number two, how to basically lower churn rates. And then I moved into a product trainer role for my last half, which was basically training sales agents on how to do their jobs well. So at the time at Google, that's actually when I started Wonsulting, about in January 2019. So it was about 4 years ago. And it just stemmed from basically seeing that folks coming from a similar background to mine, they didn't have as many opportunities to break into these respective companies because of the school that they attended, or they didn't have necessarily the connections they needed to break into those respective companies. So then how do we bridge the gap between those folks who come from these backgrounds and how do we land them into their dream careers? And that's how Wonsulting first started, just doing workshops almost every day. Did about 200 plus workshops in about 2 years, which is kind of crazy.
Wow. That sounds crazy.
But yeah, that's a little bit about it.
That sounds crazy. And I want to say, like, I think it's a great example because, as a matter of fact, me and Bruno, as we were commenting with you before, we also come from non-traditional backgrounds. We were thrown here 4 years ago into the States, following our American dream, right?
Yeah.
You come here to the States and you get to college and it kind of looks like the movies, but it does not look like the movies. And by your junior year, you're actually like, oh, I'm actually taking the class that I want into the, let's say, the coursework is related to what I want to do later on. But as an international student, I can tell you, especially coming from a non-target school, which was our case, we graduated here in Boston at Suffolk University. It is really difficult to get a job as an international student because we have the handicap of visas. And not only with that, the market, especially right now and a year ago was way better than it is right now. But right now, as you might know, the market is all over the place. There's thousands and thousands of layoffs every week. So I wanted to ask you, obviously at the time it was different from you, but coming from a non-traditional background with a non-target school, what were the techniques that you used, especially through social media like LinkedIn, as you were mentioning, that actually got you in that position?
Great question. It was a lot of, so the traditional way of landing a job is basically applying, which I can encourage people to apply to jobs. And the thing is, though, is applying just gets you, it doesn't interact you from one person to another, right? Just applying to a job, it's based on your resume. But what I tell people all the time, especially if it's for a company that you aspire to get into, let's just say it's a Google, you can apply to the job, but a core way to get into those respective companies is to actually conversate and build a relationship with someone who's a key decision maker in the company. So for example, for me, breaking into Snap and Google, Snap was basically sending a LinkedIn message to a recruiter who was hiring for a role. And I basically identified them through the techniques that I teach on social media, which was basically doing a search on LinkedIn to find the recruiter. I just searched Snap recruiter, filter to post. Nobody was doing this before. Now a lot of people do it. I feel like I taught a lot of these strategies very early on. So now a lot of people use it, which is wonderful. And then that's how I found the hiring manager. And then I reached out to the recruiter and the hiring manager who was recruiting for that role and was basically given an interview. And I didn't really even say much. I just told her about my experience through a message, how it was relevant to the role, and then was basically given an interview, and the rest was history. So that's how I got my role at Snapchat. Oh, and then to go a little about Snapchat, it wasn't just interviewing for the role. I went above and beyond, which was basically during the interview process, instead of just going through the process, just seeing, okay, maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. Instead, at the end, I presented a project that I did from my class.
Oh, that's so cool.
In the interview. And it wasn't required, but I did it because I wanted to show that I went above and beyond. And that's why I encourage people all the time, take classes or courses that are directly relevant to the roles that you're going for, because you can utilize that in your interviews. But people don't realize that, especially for data professionals. You should definitely utilize that as much as you can. So that's how I went to Snapchat. And then at Google, after we got outsourced, I actually made a LinkedIn post when nobody was making LinkedIn posts. I made a LinkedIn post. It went viral. It had over 1,000 likes, which was a lot back then. And then I had 10 people hit me up for referrals. And then I got an interview at Google from the actual hiring manager. And then I got the offer. So LinkedIn has played a huge effect in strategizing, especially for someone who comes from a non-traditional background. You have to think about what is everybody doing and what is nobody doing. And you got to do the things that nobody's doing.
You know, like everything that you said is so interesting, but I want to first, I want to comment this. Basically, you were telling your story about the necessity that you saw for non-traditional backgrounds to have these opportunities, landing these jobs. That's basically like the beginnings of what's the reason you started Wonsulting, right? For Alfredo and I, that we came to study big data business analytics at Suffolk University, we saw that people that are native Spanish speakers doesn't have the tools like a lot of English speakers have to learn about data
or technology.
or technology in general too. And that's the reason we also create the podcast to give that platform to people that they can reach out to us and we can, try to tell them the path to find a job and also learn about data. Also, Alfredo and I, we always talk about projects. That's something really interesting that you mentioned. I think Alfredo can talk a little bit better about how to create the project. With this podcast, we always encourage people
Absolutely.
to go. Our last TikTok post was about how to grab a data set from Kaggle and start doing actually projects.
Yep. Which is crazy because, as a matter of fact, it's very funny that you mentioned this, that all the techniques that I now use on a personal, on a daily basis, is because I found it on TikTok or Instagram going through your reels. And I remember that I started doing my own website portfolio because I saw one of your reels that was like the best way to land. And I always remember that you have Baby Yoda's pencil. You go through LinkedIn and you're the best way to, figure out how to attract recruiters is post your own projects. People will fall into that and people will actually be curious about what you can do. Especially coming from a background like us, which is, again, technology, in which you've been, you do understand that your value comes with the practical and usable skills that you have towards the whole industry itself and the job itself. So having a portfolio or having a project that you can explain on interviews you were mentioning, I think it's the best thing you can do, especially in this industry.
And I was going to say with that, with those projects, I love that you mentioned that, Alfredo and Bruno. The projects are something that just helps you stand out because not a lot of people are thinking about that. A lot of people are just thinking about, okay, I'm just going to go through the interview process and then I'll have them make a decision whether or not I get the job based on my interview. But if you're the one person who presents a project in the interview, then you're probably going to stand out. And people might be wondering, well, I don't want to do that for every one of my interviews. Well, you got to think about, is that a company that you really, really aspire to get into? And if so, that's when you should, because you should just put everything on the table and say to yourself, I have no regrets of getting this opportunity to interview. And I put everything on the table for me to get there. Even though I didn't get it, I tried my best. You want to have that feeling rather than one that's saying, dang, I should have done this. And you're not able to get another opportunity for it.
Completely agree with you.
I have a question for you. When you say non-traditional backgrounds, how that you translate that to the mission statement of Wonsulting, that is turn underdogs into winners. How you realize that you make all these franchise of Wonsulting based on that line and inspire a lot of people to go for that dream job here in America, or not only America, but get the inspiration. How you got that line?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for underdogs turn into winners, it basically I was just thinking that it was what I say is mission statements should be less than 5 words or slogans should be less than 5 words. So that really rang a bell. And people can identify as an underdog, whether they go to a Harvard or whether they, are an immigrant from Spain, for example. You can identify as an underdog from anywhere because, for example, maybe you still got rejected for 100 roles and you still have a great resume, but you still got rejected for hundreds of roles. You can consider yourself an underdog. So the underdog and turn into a winner is, I always thought to myself, okay, how are people from these non-traditional backgrounds, how are they going to get to the promised land, which is that dream job or that job opportunity that they've always wanted to go to? And so what we try to bridge is in the middle, how do we build those opportunities and how do we provide that information that gets them to that point? I have a lot of people who all the time will always ask me questions like, wait, you should just still apply online. You should only apply online. You should just go the traditional route, which is great. But traditionally, some people who come to the States, for example, international students or people who are working multiple jobs in university and aren't able to get internships, they don't have the privilege of working in a respective field to have that experience already. So then what you have to do is you have to do these non-traditional strategies to get to where you want to be, because you might not have the necessary experience to get there because you weren't able to do it because maybe you're taking 5 jobs to provide for your college. Or
That's a really
you just didn't have time because you're working at your mom's restaurant, helping her provide for the family.
That's a really good point, to be honest with you. Especially like I think it correlates a lot. For example, I feel very honest saying with this with you. A year ago, we graduated from college, both of us, and the market was actually looking good for our industry. Tech was like, I mean, like there was so many jobs on the rise, especially big tech companies were like over hiring, which now explains what's going on, unfortunately. But at the time, everything felt so positive in that sense. But still, international students were getting very too little jobs. On our grading class, 1,200 students from our class graduated. Out of those, I think it was like 300 something international students, and only 17 had full time jobs, which showcases,
Yeah.
again, not Target School, but in the heart of Boston, number 34 in the States, it still is. It's a gold school, right? So it comes to show that unfortunately what you're saying is true. I feel like applying nowadays, it's not enough. Because if you just apply, you're just like gonna get to submit your resume, you gotta get an ATS score, and you're just put into a ranking, like, or a list in that case. And I completely agree with you. If you're not personal nowadays and you don't separate yourself from others, it's gonna be very difficult for you to actually like show up what you got to offer to companies or startups, whatever it is that you're looking for.
You know what's so important that you guys mentioned about the projects? Because the project is a way to show that your skills in technology, actually you can do the things. For example, you can use Python, you can use R, because the majority of data analyst positions, they ask for 3 or 5 years for experience. And you get out of college, why are you going to have 5 years of experience?
Yeah.
You need to show those skills based on those projects.
And time out, like, why are like job descriptions nowadays also asking for like 50 years of experience,
Like
20 different softwares? You need to like
it's crazy.
put a rocket on Mars for you to land like a single job, pay well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's crazy now, right?
Like really funny.
yeah. I was gonna say it's crazy, especially with a lot of jobs. The saying all the time is entry level jobs requiring 5+ years experience. I think we see this a lot with LinkedIn jobs because LinkedIn jobs doesn't categorize it correctly. So they'll put in their entry level filters that you still need 5 years experience, which is crazy, right? So they need to do better in categorizing. What I tell people all the time is instead of just filtering to entry level, you just search. You either do 2 things. Number one, like for anybody who's here interested in data analyst entry level role, you should just search data analyst entry level or data analyst no experience in LinkedIn jobs. Because if you search that, then all the roles that are actually entry level that require no experience are going to show up instead of you filtering it.
That's a really good point.
That's a great advice. And also, I think we can go ask the next question, like, how is a good way to start creating that personal brand? Because making a resume that's the point of making a resume. Start putting your personal brand and what you can bring to the table to all these different companies.
And LinkedIn feel like an extension of it, right? So, with LinkedIn, like I get to post on a daily basis and I like it. I like LinkedIn community and I get to learn a lot, but it also is a really good tool for you to showcase what you got to offer, right? Like what do you think in terms of like, imagine you're a college student, maybe junior year, what would you do about your LinkedIn to start like targeting those roles and like going through like what you should do in general?
Yeah, if you're thinking about your career after you graduate during your junior year, it's a good thing. You're thinking about it early. I would think about it when if I were a freshman. So if you're a freshman listening to this, you're on the right path because you're listening to this podcast, which is a good thing. So for those who are trying to build a brand, so there's 2 different ways to do it. So let's just say the objective is, of course, to land a job opportunity in a respective company as a data analyst. So what I would do is, if I were a student, I'd start planting the seeds with 2 different types of people. Number one, people who share commonalities between you and the professional who's a data analyst. And the second one is for people who are in data analytics who are making content on LinkedIn. So how do you tackle this? There's a couple of different ways. The commonality, you have to think about to yourself, what do I identify as and what commonalities would someone share with myself and another person? An easy way to do this is why I say non-traditional backgrounds all the time is because you can, let's just say you're first gen. What you can do is on LinkedIn, you just search data analyst first gen on LinkedIn and filter to people, and you'll find all the people who are first gen who are data analysts. Since you identify as a first gen, then you can reach out to them and you use network AI. Like we created a tool that actually you can create
That's a good
messages with,
question for later. Yeah.
right?
We're gonna
So
talk
you can
about
use that, or you can just create a template and you can just say, "Hey, Alfredo, my name is Bruno. I'm a third year data analytics major. Saw that and you can just say, I'm a first gen student. I saw that you're a first gen data analyst at Yahoo. I don't know. I'd love to connect." But you see what I mean? So
Yes.
right there, you're planting the seed because you're planting the seed with someone who's also a first gen. As a first gen, would you rather help someone who's a first gen, or would you rather help someone who's not a first gen? So you got to correlate
Making
those
that connection.
respective connection points. Yeah. So
Yep.
that's one way. Alumni is another way. It's very, very basic. Everybody knows to connect with alumni. So that's why I always mention the first gen part. Another way to do it is then the next part is to connect with the data analyst or people in data analytics who are creating content. Easy way to do this is just search data analytics and filter to posts. And then what you'll find are people who are talking about data analytics. You can do two things. Number one, you can just comment on people's posts who are talking about data analytics, or you can filter it to mentioning whatever company. Let's just say Oracle, whatever it is. And then you can find people who are talking about data analytics who work at Oracle. And then you reach out to them. Same structure. Instead of just reaching out, because everybody's reaching out, right? Everybody's reaching out, clicking connect. It's basic. It's very similar to applying. You just go click apply. It's the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Instead, what people can do, and this is such a psychological effect, is imagine this, Alfredo Bruno. You have this podcast. You have someone who comments on your podcast and says, Alfredo Bruno, I love your podcast. It was amazing. I learned about this, this, this. Then they sent you a message on LinkedIn saying, hey, just watched your podcast, just commented on your post. I'd love to connect. Would you rather connect with that person, or would you rather connect with a random person who just says, Alfredo, I saw that you work at Google. I'd love to connect. It's probably the former. But you see how psychologically you can do that? Well, obviously you should like their post. Like you should actually like it. You shouldn't fake it. Just want to put that out there. But it's an easy way to build rapport. And then it's the best way to look for a job is when you're not looking. Because then once the opportunity arises and you're already connected with the person, then you can just be like, oh, hey, Alfredo, I know you've been connected for 4 months. By the way, this position just opened up. Would love to hear more about what you think if I should apply or not. And they'll be like, yeah, sure. I can refer you, or I might know the person internally.
Before we start talking about different products that Wonsulting has to offer, I want to ask you, how's your perspective as an entrepreneur in the technology industry? How was the first big challenge that you need to face when you first opened Wonsulting?
True. And before you comment on that, though, I want to mention something which is really important. I love that you are mentioning emotional intelligence, characteristics, put it onto the way you look for things on LinkedIn and how you reach out to people. Because I feel like people neglect that a lot. Emotional intelligence nowadays, it's lacking a lot, unfortunately. You find a lot of people who just go straight to the point. It happens to me. People want me to refer them to my company. They're like, hey, can you refer me? And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But if you send me a 5-line message saying blah, 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 I might think about it. So we always mention the soft skills and the emotional intelligence. I love that you're also bringing that up. And obviously it's worked for you and it's worked for millions of people. So just want to say props to you in that sense.
Thank you. And 100%. I think the emotional intelligence part of just being human is so important, especially with networking. Rather, it's how do I provide value to the other person rather than how do I take value from that person? Because most people will just want take. What can you do for me rather than what can I do for you? Or how can we help each other? And then to go into your question about basically, sorry, could you repeat your question again?
No worries. My question was what was the biggest challenge you have as a technology entrepreneur in the beginning when you opened Wonsulting, before we start talking about the products that Wonsulting have to offer?
Yeah. The biggest challenge for starting Wonsulting, or the biggest challenge for me as an entrepreneur, is I have a very interesting, as a CEO, but also a content creator, it's interesting. Because most people will only be either a CEO or in an executive level role, or they'll be a content creator. For me, it's a mix of both. So then you have to balance yourself in a way of, okay, how do I lead a team and manage a team of individuals? But at the same time, how do I make content that helps me grow my business? So one of the things that's a challenge is how do you even balance that out so you can not burn out? And an easy way to do that is the following. Number one, the people you hire is so important. The first hires that we've had at Wonsulting have been amazing. They've been helping a lot with growing our business. And I think the best part about hiring is you should hire people who are smarter than you at fields that you are not strong in or fields that you want to learn in. So we've made some good decisions, especially with hiring people. And then secondly, with content creation, I do a lot of batching content. So instead of just saying, okay, I'll create one piece of content for 5 minutes, I usually will create like 30 pieces of content in an hour just to make it easier. And then I have a team who helps me post the content and build it. So that's been definitely beneficial and has helped a lot with the work-life balance. But all in all, it's just about not burning out and figuring out a way which works for you in terms of what side of you are you a CEO versus a content creator. It's something that I personally was challenged with before, but now I've been able to get accustomed to it fairly quickly.
That sounds super interesting, especially taking into account that you and Jerry have so much success, right? And you guys have done so much over the years, and you guys have had so many recognitions as well. Because obviously, you guys have gone into Wall Street Journal, again, 30 under 30 for Forbes. And it feels amazing that you guys are getting recognized, because I follow you guys from the early stages. Again, through social media, just seeing tips, and I was like, oh, this sounds super interesting. And then I get to see you guys grow into the services and products you guys have. And your whole mission is we're helping people out. We want to help others to land their dream jobs, which again, I think it's something super spiritual, amazing that you guys want to do that. And I think going into the products, we want to comment a bit on what you guys offer. I think it's also a good opportunity for you to showcase how you guys got into that point. When you wanted to add something?
Yeah, before you continue with the other questions, I just want to add this too. Like, I think that balance you were mentioning of the content creation thing and actually being the CEO, because I can see that you like to be involved in the creating side of the product too. Like, I think the CEO is like the most formal, responsible role, but you like to be involved in the content creation part of it. Like, how sometimes you manage that, like, because of course you need to be aware of all the things that is happening in the company, but you can escape now to give your support in the content creation part of it.
And I was going to say, for being a content creator, it's great because as you build products, you are able to get user feedback very quickly, and you get it very proactively from users rather than you always having to search for them and say, okay, how is my product even doing? So I get messages all the time saying, hey, like, I have this problem with the tool, or hey, I love this tool because of this, this, this. So it's definitely a good thing to be a content creator too, because then if you're building a product or a company, you then build a community around it that's going to be supporting you throughout your journey.
You're receiving the feedback right away. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
That's really good. But also, I feel like your products have grown so much over the years, because I remember a couple of years ago, well, actually like a year ago, I remember you guys had like this packages of like, apply for me for 50 jobs on my behalf, something that might sound super simple, but it saves so much time for you to put a couple of details and have someone that is looking through jobs and actually like filtering what actually is good for you in terms of like job search. That's a very important, like, and interesting package you guys had at the time, which is the one that I used that ultimately helped me out with my job. But now with the growth of AI and products like that are AI powered, we've seen also grown into like Wonsulting's products. Like we've seen Resume, Networking AI, which I've tried both of them. They are fantastic. And I actually got access to the beta of Resume. And it's very interesting because now you get to see it and compare with tools like ChatGPT. And I wanted to ask you, what is your take on that? Because everyone's going crazy about AI powered tools like ChatGPT, but Resume came first. And I remember when it came out, it was crazy, which I still use to this day to like actually like formulate my own resume.
How your product is competing now with the one right now?
Yes, it's such a great question. So ChatGPT is an amazing tool. It's one that, of course, OpenAI has been working on for some time. I mean, they utilized OpenAI, which was basically GPT-3 and GPT-4 before. So I have a whole entire YouTube video of how we differentiate from ChatGPT. I think that especially with AI tools in general, AI tools will never get you to 100% mark, meaning that there has to be a human element to it that needs to edit something. So for example, like when you're building a resume on Resume AI, you'll put a few words, and then our AI will basically think about, okay, how does this directly relate to the position that you put, to the roles that you're going to be going for? And how does it quantify it in a way where it's able to showcase your hard skills, your relevant skills, your metrics, starts with an action verb, etc. And that's great, right? But you need that human element to it. So you can't just expect it to, okay, you add all the bullets and then I'm done. You have to edit it in a way where it's tailored directly to the roles that you're going for. And that's why I just want to preface and say that AI tools cannot replace people. They work with people. Secondly, for ChatGPT is great, but for example, it won't go directly to a resume builder, right? So for example, you can make the bullets on ChatGPT, but does it directly go directly to a resume builder to structure your resume? It doesn't. Maybe they'll have that capability later, right? But for Resume AI, what it does is it directly tailors that bullet towards the job description, towards the role you're going for, makes it into a resume. So you're able to create your resume in 15, 20 minutes, fairly easier. And the bullets are a lot better, and it gives a lot more guidance compared to ChatGPT, where you might just say, give me 3 bullets that directly relate to becoming a data analyst. Instead, imagine you had 5 words about being a data analyst, and you said, let's just say you created SQL queries for senior management. That's all you need for it to create 3 bullet examples that you can use for your resume that are hopefully going to get you an interview. So yeah, but I love AI tools that are going out right now. What I say all the time is AI tools are a collaborative effort. They aren't a replacement.
Agreed. I see that with a lot of people. I was actually commenting this with a friend the other day that I work with. Like, an AI will never replace you. Someone that knows how to work with AI might get to a point of replacing you, right? So I completely agree with you. And especially like now that you said this, what might be the next steps for you guys? Because it also feels like you guys have been doing content for like 5 years now, almost 5 years, right? Or 4 years now. In terms of like products, where do you guys see Wonsulting growing? Because obviously you guys are doing also like LinkedIn courses. You guys are doing your own thing in terms of products. Where do you see the company growing?
To stay competitive.
Historically we've been a services-based company, which has all been basically working with clients one-on-one on their services, which has been doing really well. So the reason why our company has grown so much and we're able to pivot to a product first company now is because we've been able to utilize the services side first to fund the product side, which has been it's been a privilege and just been a very amazing experience to work with great clients like yourself, Alfredo. So in the future, we're really switching that from doing services to being product first. And we think about it in that way because that's how you can scale. It's very difficult to scale from a one-on-one career coach perspective because a lot of the things that we are doing, they can be automated, but there is processes that have to be manual at the end of the day. So it's a lot with basically creating more tools to help job seekers. And then how do you build that system where a job seeker can say to themselves, okay, I don't have to go on multiple platforms. Why don't I just use one platform for my job search? So that's the goal and the vision of what's going to be next. It's going to be happening in the next 3 months. So I'm excited to see.
Good luck with that.
Best of luck with that. It sounds super interesting and definitely will follow up on that. And besides that, I think you want to answer the last question?
Okay, the last question that we tried to ask is that, let's say this is a scenario. You never became the CEO of Wonsulting. You never did anything about with this. What else do you think you're going to be doing right now?
Yeah, what would you have done if Wonsulting never happened, right?
You know, like...
What I would do probably is if Wonsulting never happened, basically I think that I would do something with my wife in the Philippines to help those individuals who are looking for roles in the US and providing opportunities for them. I think there's a big gap there's a big opportunities for Filipinos, especially working in the States as assistants. So I think helping bridge that gap between individuals who come from my background and helping them go into opportunities. And I would be very focused on that realm, on how do we provide opportunities for those individuals. I know one's open for everybody, but that's how I would focus on one specific demographic.
No, that's beautiful that you mentioned that, because I grew up, my father is a lawyer. I have a couple of businesses back in Philippines. And part of the things he always do is to help sailors to get represented in a bunch of cases that they don't have lawyers to represent them. It's kind of a similar thing that you were mentioning. And I think I grew up watching that. I was raised by a Filipino person. And I was really touched by what you said. And I think it's a great opportunity for them. You guys are the best. Just saying.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your honest answer. Maybe we would have expected something crazy. We've had people on the podcast say like a lot of crazy things. But I see a pattern here, which is that you're a helper, that you love helping people.
That was really deep, though.
And that's amazing. So, again, we want to thank you. With you today, we're close to season 2. It's been a great journey so far. And hopefully we get to see you and Wonsulting grow as much as you guys can. You guys are amazing, and you guys are helping a lot of people like ourselves to earn our dream jobs. So, hopefully you guys keep doing that for a long time. And
not only with your product, also with your story. I think what you did with your partner is really inspiring.
Super inspiring.
For Alfredo and I think we're always going to follow like people like you guys.
Took inspiration from you guys. And we were mentioned, Eugene Hayden? You probably know the guy, BCG.
Yeah.
He mentioned you guys. He was like, oh, you guys remind me of them. So you guys are a huge inspiration for a lot.
For us, that was the biggest flutter in the world, just in the story about the underdogs into winners. I think, but I have to say, last thing is that always giving the extra mile, like you said before, even when people are not expecting that, that's a key component to achieve what you really want to achieve.
Definitely. And for everybody listening in, it's going above and beyond does not make you seem desperate. I want to clarify that, because a lot of people think, well, doesn't that make me look desperate? It just shows cases what you could potentially do if you were to get the job. You would go above and beyond rather than just doing the bare minimum. And I think that's very important, especially when looking for someone for a role. And I say this because all the people that I've actually hired, a lot of them, like our marketing manager, for example, she made a deck. We didn't tell her to make a deck, but she made a deck for her interview. And that's one of the reasons why we hired her, because she had a vision of what she wanted to make for marketing for Wonsulting. So you never know where that deck or that project can get you.
That's a really cool.
That's really inspiring, and a good way to close out, actually.
Agree. With this, thank you so much, Jonathan.
Jonathan, thank you so much for your time.
And
anytime.
Get to collaborate in the future. Again, thanks so much.
Of course.
Best of luck for you guys.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Have a good one.